Morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. There's a situation that I've spoken of in the past about the economy and where it's going, and what the signs will be that we can see the escalation of events, the order of events that will happen prior to a collapse. Now, we kind of go in and out of these sorts of things. We get into some of the features of an economic collapse, and then we kind of recover a little bit depending on who's in government, what's happening, what sort of crises are going on in the world. But there's more trouble on the economic horizon. As we see in Isaiah 17, we see famine. We see glimpses of economic trouble spoken of in Isaiah 17. Same with Ezekiel 38. So when these things occur, there's economic trouble and strife. And this is from my keynote presentation. I kind of have it detailed out the steps that you'll see prior to economic collapse and probably more significantly prior to the mark of the beast system. So step one, and this is again from my timeline of the return of the Lord keynote, steps to the mark of the beast. Number one is interest rates. You see at the very top there, interest rates. Let me just, can I pull it down? Oh well. Anyways, number one, interest rates head to zero as economic woes continue, it says. I can't even go down there. Number two, so interest rates heading to zero as we have trouble, and we're going to take a look at an article that basically spells that out. They're forecasting over the next 2 years interest rates are going to go back to zero. We were at zero. They were trying to get interest rates back up. The Federal Reserve was of the United States, so that if the economy got rough again, they would be able to decrease it again. And so it looks like we're going back to zero. So the second thing on the way to the mark of the beast is that interest rates will go negative. And this is to further help markets. So when zero interest rates don't help anymore, and they didn't have time to raise the interest rates are then going to go negative. So what happens when the interest rates go negative? Well, number three is people start pulling their money out of the banks because they're losing money that they have in the bank. So interest rates go negative, and instead of you getting money to put your money in the bank, instead of the banks paying you to keep your money in the bank, it's going to start costing you to keep your money in the bank. So if you have a couple of $1,000s in there, you're going to say, well, I'm not going to pay the bank to keep my money. They were paying me interest before to leave it there. But now I'm going to pull it out and put it somewhere else. I'm going to spend it on something so it's not decreasing in value, or I'm going to pull it out and put it in under my pillow, and at least it's not losing money at that time. So that's number three in the order of things. As interest rates go negative, people start pulling money out of the bank. Now the governments don't want that. The banks don't want that. That would crash the banks. The banks wouldn't have any money to invest or do anything with at that point. The banks use your money when it's in the bank to do their own business, to invest in the markets and to make money off of. So number four would then be that the government then restricts the use of cash. Do you see the restriction of cash happening right now? Certainly we see a move to electronic use, and many stores these days don't even accept cash. And so the government's going to move to restrict the use of cash. They're going to say things like, well, organized crime uses cash. Cash is used more for money laundering. If everything is digital, then we can keep crime out of the monetary system. That's what they're going to say. The government is eventually going to outlaw it because that money has to stay in the bank. That money has to stay in the control of the government and the banks for the situation for the economy to keep going. So number five is that the government then removes cash altogether. They just stop making it, and they pull it in from the banks. So when you deposit your money, they grab that cash, send it back to the mint, and they don't put it out in circulation anymore. And at that point in time, then they create this mark of the beast system, this cashless, world cashless monetary system, an electronic cashless system. And this effectively is the mark of the beast. So these are the steps toward the mark of the beast. We are heading back to zero interest rates. We did go into negative interest rates for a little while there, not officially, but there were car companies that were selling cars at negative interest rates, i.e., they would pay you effectively to purchase a car. And so we've seen negative interest rates in the markets already, and that's what they're going to start doing. And I think if you look at the timeline below there, it says we are here, the first red arrow. And in one of my other timelines, I actually moved that ahead. I think this is going to be part and parcel of the economic collapse, Isaiah 17, Ezekiel 38. I think it's all going to start happening all in around the same time. So what proof do I have of this? Well, let me go to, this is the economic collapse blog.com. Economic chaos erupts, global manufacturing plunges, the trade war expands, and NASDAQ enters correction territory. So you have issues on the Dow Jones, on the NASDAQ. You have the trade wars and the tariff wars with China, which again is the trigger point. Was the trigger point of 1929. I've spoken of it in the past. Watch my video about what caused 1929. Let's take a look at a few things. It says the global economic slowdown is really starting to accelerate. Just within the past few days, we've gotten more awful manufacturing jobs. It says we have not witnessed this sort of global economic environment since the Great Recession, 2008. And if the economic chaos continues to accelerate, it won't take too much to spark a brand new financial crisis. It says, of course, the global financial system is far more vulnerable than it was in 2008. That's because we kicked the can down the road. We didn't solve any issues in 2008. We simply printed a bunch of money, and everybody thought everything was awesome. But they didn't do anything with the global debt. The United States debt is sitting around $22 trillion right now, I believe. And so there's manufacturing numbers, there's trade tariffs, there's a slowdown in shipping from China. All these things are just one more straw on the camel's back, and we're going to plunge into economic collapse. Global financial markets are increasingly shaky. The Nasdaq fell another 120 points. If you watched my video from yesterday, you saw the three peaks, what I called the head and shoulders, and what comes after that is a significant downturn. And all we're looking at is one trigger point for a complete and total economic collapse. The world has been ready for the scale to be tipped since 2008, basically, since they printed a pile of money. Stocks ended mostly lower Monday, June 1st, a day of trading, amid reports the U.S. government is planning to target a host of big tech companies with antitrust and business practice probes. And they go after the three or four big ones, I guess. Shares of Alphabet, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple all weighed on the market during Monday's session. Nasdaq dropped 1.6% into correction territory. So we're in troubles with the markets. We're in trouble with world trade. We're in trouble with war as a war escalates against Iran, and that means an increase in the price of oil. The term correction territory, it says, might not mean a lot to many of you, so let me put what is happening into terms you may understand. The writer says, on Monday alone, America's most prominent tech stocks lost $150 billion in territory. It looks like Trump administration is getting ready to go to war with the big tech companies. So, and then the article gets into the trade war. Speaking of war, our trade conflict with China continues to escalate. This is a big deal. I can't say it enough. This is what caused the 1929 Great Depression. This is what will be a trigger point or a one piece of the puzzle that causes whenever the economy falls again, it will cause that depression. And it will be worse than the Great Depression because we don't know how to grow our own gardens these days. We don't know how to survive in this technological world without electricity, without cell phone access, etc. Chinese have decided to put purchases of U.S. soybeans on hold until a trade agreement is reached. It goes on and talks about the situation. Global trade war is going to be incredibly painful for everybody, it says, and this is all happening at a time when the global economy was already starting to slow substantially. And of course, like I say, we have the war potential in the Middle East. Druckenmiller dumps all his stocks, piles into treasuries, expecting rates to hit zero. So this is a guy with money It says, when Trump tweet went out, I went from 93% invested in to net flat and bought a bunch of treasuries, Druckenmiller said Monday. So you have these big people that are getting out of the markets, getting out of investments, and really are going to safe haven investments. Explaining his decision, Druck said that it's not because I'm trying to make money, I just don't want to play in this environment. He's trying to preserve the money he has, just like people who will pull their money out of the banks when interest rates go negative. All they want to do is try to preserve their wealth. They're not trying to increase it anymore. Things are so scary that they're just trying to hold on to what they have. And so that's what Druckenmiller is doing. And I will put this link in the description. You can read it. Such situation in Syria. U.S. warplanes are striking in Syria. Destroy apparently 3 oil tankers, killing 4. On Friday, U.S. warplanes destroyed 3 oil tankers that were traveling through Syria Kurdish territory. At least 4 people killed in the attack. So U.S. is still doing significant attacks in Syria on top of what Israel is already doing. A couple of comments about the Temple Mount. Hamas, there will be consequences when consequences to police presence on Temple Mount. Of course, they want their Waqf, the Jordanian-controlled Waqf, to control the Temple Mount. But with Jerusalem Day and Jews going up there was massive riots. So the police were up there in force. And Hamas is coming and saying that they're going to do something. They were the ones who started the riots. It was the Arabs, the Muslims, who started the riots on the Temple Mounts when the Jews went up there. And it is, again, the Muslims who are threatening more violence because of the police presence, which was there to quell the Muslim violence on the Temple Mount. Here's Ynet News. Jordan. Israel's actions on Temple Mount will trigger new round of violence. So it was the Muslims who triggered the violence that caused the Israeli police to go up there to keep the peace. And now the Muslims are saying, well, because the police are up there stopping the violence, we're going to cause more violence. Can you explain it in any other way? Jordan slams Israel's decision to allow Jewish visitors on the Temple Mount Jerusalem Day, warning it could lead to fresh violence. But that violence is not caused by Jews. Again, the violence is caused by the Muslims on the Temple Mount. Jerusalem Day, which celebrates the reunification of the city in 1967, coincides with the final days of Ramadan. We condemn the continuation of Israeli violations at Al-Aqsa Mosque by extremists, and this wasn't by Jewish extremists, who have the backing of the security forces, said the Jordanian Foreign Ministry. The statement also warned of dangerous consequences of the provocative Israeli policy, which could lead to new escalation. So you have the Temple Mount frustrations, the holy war going on in this world. We have the war in the Middle East building up. We have the economic trouble reaching a peak. We have the trade war tariffs with China going on, which in and of itself could trigger economic collapse. I think the economic collapse is kind of the kingpin. I think it's the one thing that would catapult the world into end-time Bible prophecy. It's the one thing that would trigger war in the Middle East. It's the one thing that would take all Western nations out of power, which Isaiah 17 does not speak of in terms of Western nations. Isaiah 17, Ezekiel 38 does not speak of any Western nations being participating. Not to mean that they're completely destroyed, but that they're taken out of any global significance or influence. And I think an economic collapse would do exactly that and catapult us into end-time Bible prophecy. And so I think we're very, very close to economic collapse spoken of in these various articles that I've been speaking of. I'll leave it there, guys. That is a look at the situation where we are. And I think we're on this timeline. We're very, very close to world events converging to the point of the start of the 7-year period spoken of in Daniel 9. And I think an economic collapse could very well be the one thing that kicks it all off. And we are seeing it now. We are seeing the economic collapse nearing right now. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll leave it there. We'll see you guys in the next video.